Hi guys, welcome back to the Pageant Project. Today I want to talk about red flags. 7 red flags specifically that I want you guys to look for in pageant coaches if you decide to take on a coach. And there's a couple of reasons that I want to talk about red flags in the coaching industry today or this week. Number one, I had an interview with Ashley Gonor earlier today. I've been coaching both her daughters, Paige and Presley, including with Paige pretty intensively for a new coaching offer that I'm working on. And I'm working with a few other secret clients behind the scenes. I mentioned Paige because we talked about Paige in the interview that I had with Ashley. I believe it's called Uncover Your Magic. She's actually released it already, and I'll put the link to our interview in the show notes or in the link below this video if you wanted to check that out. So that's number one, because she asked me a lot about pageant coaching and what I thought needed to change. She said to me, even before I interviewed, that she thought that I was the missing piece when it came to pageant coaching. And we delved into that and what I thought that I was bringing to the pageant space that was perhaps not only different, but I think very, very needed. And that comes from my background as a life coach, but also a lifelong learner, a lifelong coach. If you don't know, I was a tennis coach for over 10 years, including a stint as a head coach at an all-girls tennis school, all-girls high school, beg your pardon. So we went through a lot of these sort of ideas, this sort of discussion in that interview. And I just wanted to provide a summary of it and get you to think about it here because it's in the front of my mind. But the other thing is, as I've been working on this new coaching offering with people such as Paige, it's really been making me think about, because when someone comes to me, they've almost always had some sort of coaching before, or very often, I shouldn't say almost always. And one thing that has struck me is that very often, especially with the people who are highly competitive and they really, really want to win, and a whole list of other qualities that I could go into, such as self-awareness. But one thing that I seem to need to be doing more often than I'd like is deprogramming. And that's one of the things that I spoke about in my interview with Ashley, is that one of the things I've been working on with Paige and with other clients is they're worried that they sound too cliche. They're worried that they sound too much like everyone else and they sound too pageant. And to give you an idea, especially an interview, if you're someone who begins every answer with as a title holder or as a role model, as someone who works in STEM, not having to go at anyone in the STEM field, but what I'm pointing at is that you start every sentence with every answer with the as a, or there are other things, right? I've seen some people's entire coaching sessions, and if the coach, for example, is telling you how to answer, or they keep just telling you how they would answer, and they're giving you entire scripts almost to memorize. The issue that I've seen with that sort of coaching is that there's no real tailoring to you, to your strengths, to your story. They may change bits and bobs of the actual answer to fit you, for example, depending on what you're studying or what your occupation is. But the answer is about 80 to 90% the same. And then to me, it just honestly doesn't make sense. And I get quite frustrated because on one hand, coaches keep saying, well, in order to win, you need to be yourself, you need to be authentic, and you need to stand out from the crowd, which I agree with. But then on the other hand, their solution to that seems to be, well, come to me for coaching and I'll teach you how to do all those things, such as being authentic and standing out from the crowd. But then they give all of you the same script and all of you the exact same coaching. And then what happens? You don't stand out at all because you all sound exactly the same, because you're all going to the same coaches who all tell you the same thing. And this is not me bashing other coaches. I know there are other quality coaches out there. And by the way, sponsored coaches or coaches who have lots of experience don't necessarily equate to quality coaches. But my experience has been from working with clients who've had other coaching. I haven't been super impressed, if I'm honest, because they seem to come out of that coaching relationship, and the coaching relationship could have gone for years. and they sound very formulaic. And I can tell because the client, not me, the client is getting frustrated because they keep doing what the coach says, whether it's a walk coach, a runway coach, an interview coach, and they don't feel that they're improving. Now, part of that is to do with Pageant. If you don't get a score, for example, and not only that, if you don't get feedback, it's very difficult to know what to improve on, which I certainly understand, and that's nothing to do with the coach. It's not the coach's fault. But the coach has a part to play in terms of the understanding when you work with most coaches is that if you go to them, you're going to increase your chances of winning. You're certainly not going to a coach, at least I hope, to decrease your chances of winning. So I really want you to think, well, what is that coach giving me that is actually helping me be competitive and is actually helping me stand out, that they're not giving to anyone else? Because if you're going to stand out, you need to be different from everyone else. Agreed? Because if you don't stand out from everyone else, if you're not different from everyone else, you're not going to stand out. And that's something that I have been coming up against, and quite frankly, it's irked me quite a lot because I feel like I need to spend most of my time deprogramming the Pageant Patty answers. And so that's one of the things, well, that's one of the reasons. So those two reasons are why this has been on my mind. So number one, the interview that I did with Ashley Gonor today, but number two, also the work that I've been doing more so behind the scenes. I haven't talked about it a lot to respect people's privacy. And so this has really been on my mind. So I ran my interview with Ashley through Claude over here, and it suggested to talk about Pageant coaching red flags, and it's come up with 7 here. And most of these I talked about, well, I think all of these I talked about in my interview with Ashley. So again, I'll put the link below if you wanted to watch a whole interview. I think it's about an hour long. It's an hour and 20 minutes long or so. So here are the main ones. And guys, if you're listening, I'm doing a screen share now, and you can actually see the issues or the red flags that Claude suggests. And Claude, by the way, if you don't know, is another version of AI similar to ChatGPT. Some people are telling me that it's better than ChatGPT in terms of giving specific feedback rather than generic feedback, and so I'm giving it a go. So here are the 7 red flags it suggested, and again, it pulled them from my interview with Ashley. So we'll go through these, and what I want you to do is think about whether this applies to some of the coaches that you've been working with, and if they have, maybe start thinking about how I'm going to do things differently. I hope by now, by the way, you all know that I'm a huge fan of your ability to coach yourself and learn yourself. That hopefully goes without saying by this point. But number one, they rely on outdated credentials. So Claude here has said coaches who trade on having won a state title, I said 5,000 years ago. That's being disingenuous. Obviously, that's exaggeration, but I was making a point. So coaches who trade on having won a state title or national title or any title a long time ago, or being a, in inverted quotes, the sponsored or official coach, without showing how their methods have evolved. The world changed dramatically, even just since COVID. If their coaching hasn't, that's a problem. And so I've spoken my piece, I think, about being the sponsored or official coach, and I don't think there's any problem with that as long as the contestants still have free choice over who they actually work with. Where I have a problem with sponsored or official coaches is where directors pretty much forbid their contestant or their title holders to work with any other coaches. Or they, even if they don't expressly forbid, they make it very clear that they don't want their title holders to work with any other coaches, even though they might have had existing relationships with those coaches, or even though the other coach might be better, they want their title holders to only work with the sponsored and official coaches. And I think that's a problem. And I say that because generally what happens is that the reason that the sponsored or official coach becomes that is because they have a personal relationship with the director. And so the director is friendly with that coach, brings them on as the official coach, and then is basically forcing title holders to work with those coaches. Now you might say, well, they're sponsored, it's free. Sponsored doesn't always mean free. It can very often mean discounted, or you get the first session for free, and after that you have to pay. And so there's money changing hands here. And so it's very, very murky. So I have strong feelings about, and they're mainly negative about, working with sponsored or official coaches. As long as it's out of free choice, that's fine. But very often it's not. And again, I know this from all the behind the scenes information that I'm privy to from having worked with thousands of you guys, thousands of contestants. The part when I said people relying on winning a state title 5,000 years ago, as I said, that's exaggeration. But I feel very often coaches rely on, I won Miss XYZ in 2023, or I won Miss So-and-so back in 1983. And there's nothing wrong with having expertise, but there's much more to being a great coach than you having won a title. And you well know, I don't need to tell you this, that pageant judging is very subjective and hit and miss. And sometimes the person who won probably isn't the person that we believe should have won. And sometimes there are funny things going on behind the scenes. But even apart from, that's why I would say I don't put too much stock or faith in, she won a title, because I don't know what that title really was like. But more so than that, if someone is saying, I should be your interview coach because I won Miss whatever it was, right? I have seen situations where the person saying, I would make an excellent interview coach because I won a title, and then you look at the title and there was no interview component or a very small interview component. These are things that I want you to be cognizant of that are happening, and just to take everything with a bit of a grain of salt, but look into things. So that's red flag number 1, rely on outdated credentials. Red flag number 2, they teach a formula that can't possibly work. The do A and you win model is logically flawed. If you teach 10 contestants the same formula, only one can win. A coach selling certainty of outcome is selling something they can't deliver. I mentioned this before, and factually, I think you can see that makes sense. If I work with 10 people from the same system, there's no way that all of them can win. And again, pageant judging being incredibly subjective, there is no secret formula. I like to think of it as there are certainly skills that you can learn, but there's no such thing as, if I learn this framework for answering, or I learn this spin in my runway, or I wear this certain dress and I'm definitely going to win, or if I go blonde this year, I'm going to win, all those sorts of things. There's a lot of things that almost myths, urban myths that are being propagated in pageantry that simply need to be debunked. They don't work. And anyone charging you for that is someone that you should really not be working with. Number 3, their entire toolkit is think positive and be yourself. That's not coaching, that's a bumper sticker. If a coach can't go deeper than surface level positivity, they're not equipped to help a contestant at a meaningful level. Now, the reason this one has come up is because in my interview with Ashley, I spoke a lot about mindset. And if you know anything about the way I coach, I'm very much a mindset first. Strategy is important, but mindset, I believe, is about 80% of the game. And so if your coach, if we agree that mindset and psychology is important, then if you're going to take on a coach, you want them to know something about mindset and psychology, right? I think that just makes sense. And so if the entirety of your coach's mindset education is think positive and be yourself, I think you deserve more than that. So I might leave that at that one, but if you believe mindset's important, then you want to check, how much does my coach actually know about how to get the most out of my mindset, how to control my state, how to instill confidence, all of those things, because those are things that have tools, and you can give very specific instructions as to how to help yourself get more confident, for example, when you need to, or how to overcome, for example, imposter syndrome or perfectionism. There are very specific steps you can take to overcome those things. And if your coach doesn't know how to do that, you're leaving, I think, a lot up to chance. You're just hoping that everything works out, and you're hoping that you'll be feeling great on the day. And I don't like leaving things up to chance if you really want to take home the big title. Number 4, they bring their client down instead of elevating them. When a contestant outgrows a coach or challenges them, a bad coach turns it around on the girl, calling her too pushy or expecting too much, rather than acknowledging the fit isn't right. Now, I was specifically talking about this with Ashley during the interview because, as I said, I've been working with Paige, and Paige is incredibly focused and incredibly driven, very disciplined, and basically doesn't suffer fools gladly, if I can put it that way. I hope you're okay with me saying that, Paige, if you're listening to this. But the reason I bring it up is because someone like that who's playing the game at this level, and if you're listening to this, I mean a really, really high level, the coach they're going to work best with, the coach they need, the coach they deserve, also has to be playing the game at that level or even higher to encourage them. My experience, again, with pageant coaches, and I hate to be sounding continuously negative about them, but this is what I keep getting fed behind the scenes. Not about every coach, I get that, or I hope that I don't need to say that. But a lot of the coaches, and specifically some of the coaches that are most well-known in the industry, which really, really worries me. But you see, they never post any coaching content. All they post is testimonials claiming people left, right, and center. And sometimes they're claiming people that I know I've worked with more than they have. And all they post, no coaching content. They just post testimonial, testimonial, testimonial. This is my client. This is my client. This is my client. I'm not seeing any evidence that they put any effort into up-leveling their coaching knowledge, up-leveling their skills, or anything like that. And I think that if they were, they'd be posting about it. And so if you're that sort of person who's really driven, really ambitious, knows what she wants, you're always improving. Guess what? You also need a coach. Well, you need to work with a coach who's also committed to continually improving themselves. In medicine, for example, to maintain your status as a doctor, at least here in Australia, you need to be going to continual accreditation throughout the year. So that means you need to be attending certain educational events to make sure that your medical knowledge stays up to date, and so that you're not giving your patients out-of-date treatments, which could be, if not dangerous, then at least suboptimal. My question to you is your coach doing the same thing for themselves? Are they, for example, continually up-leveling their knowledge about how to use AI? This is one big bugbear that I have, is that there are a lot of people who are stuck in the dark ages, and by dark ages, I mean before 2020, because if you remember, that's about when I think ChatGPT came out, was sometime during the COVID dark years. And if they're telling you, oh, AI, not that they would probably say that AI is bad, I certainly hope they're not saying that. If they are, run. But if they're not showing you something as simple as being able to use voice mode to train mock interview, or using voice mode to work on debates, constructive debates, so you can work on formulating your opinions on really difficult matters, that's not a coach you want to be working with, because this is not a coach who has stayed up with the times. This is not a coach who's looked at something as huge, right? As huge as the advent of commercially very freely able to access AI. And there's someone who frankly hasn't had the curiosity to go, this huge new tool, I wonder how I could use it, or how I could show my clients how to use it in order to help them become not only better competitors, but better people, and help them achieve their life goals. If you're working with a coach who hasn't had the foresight or the curiosity to do that, and then on top of it, compounding on some of the things we've talked about before, all they're doing is relying on their status as a sponsored or official coach. And then on top of that, the only thing they do is claim clients and then say, oh, you should come to me because I've been in this industry for 5,000 years and I won some title that you never heard of back in 1932. This is where, okay, one red flag by itself may not mean much, but if they compound, I seriously suggest you look at not necessarily coming to work with me, although you certainly can send me a message and we can have that conversation. You might be better off at doing a lot of this research yourself, coaching yourself, or at least finding a coach who's moving with the times. So that's number 4. And that really applies if you're someone who you know you're intelligent, you know you're sharp, you know you're ambitious, and sometimes you just outgrow your coach. Don't stay with the coach. You need a coach who is going to continue to evolve with you and will continue to push you. Number 5, they answer for the contestant. Now, I gave an example in the interview of the mum who basically came to a mock interview session, and when I asked the daughter a mock interview question, the mum told her what to say. It's just a waste of time as far as I'm concerned. So any coach who doesn't protect the contestant's voice and authentic expression is doing damage, not development. So in a coaching situation, and I've seen this, is where a coach, their advice seems to just be, well, here's how I'd answer it. I mean, that's not a terrible thing to put in every now and then, but if that's the only thing, or the majority of the coaching information or the wisdom that you have is, well, here's how I do it, that's really not that useful beyond a very, very basic level. And frankly, you'd get past that level within 1 or 2 weeks. And I'm not exaggerating there. 1 or 2 weeks of solid, consistent interview work, you'd be beyond, well, here's how I'd interview it. Number 6, they focus entirely on strategy and ignore mindset. Walk technique, interview script, stage routines. These are strategy. A coach obsessed with strategy while ignoring state and story is only ever going to get 10 to 20% of the result they could. Now, this is a lot to unpack. This, again, is because I work a lot in mindset, and Ashley was asking me about some of the tools that I've talked about. In my coaching education, my life coaching education, we believe we were taught, and this is a framework, that in order for someone to have a breakthrough, so not an incremental improvement, but a gigantic breakthrough, there are 3 components or 3 possibilities, 3 different ways that could happen. Now, the 3 components are state, story, strategy. Most coaches only know about strategy, and strategy is the least important part. It's very rare that you have a gigantic breakthrough in your ability in any field because someone has given you a strategy that you've never thought of before. Now, that's not to say it's unimportant. And there are certain examples, for example, when I think about certain nutrition information and when I tried, for example, the keto diet and I did it right and I managed to not lose weight because it's a bit misleading when it comes to keto, but lose inches around my waist and watch the body fat percentage come down, I would consider that to be a breakthrough, and that mainly was strategy, right? Here's the strategy, do this, reduce carbs, increase the intake of fat and proteins. That's strategy. State and story, however, are often more, I think in the majority of cases, much more important. So state basically is saying, well, what emotional state are you in? So if you're someone who, let's say, is continually feeling tired, depressed, anxious, maybe sad or frustrated or anxious, if those are the habitual states that you live in, that's something that you really need to address. Because, we talk about, the state that most people want when they go into interview or they go into runway in pageants is confidence. So learning how to not control, but to manage your state and how to get into a state of confidence or feeling powerful or feeling unstoppable when you really need to, that's something that's hugely important. And it's not something you have to wait for, by the way. Get out of this idea that I hope that on competition day, I hope that I wake up feeling confident. We don't want to just hope. But again, this comes into the psychology and the coaching. You need a coach who knows more about mindset than, cross your fingers, right? This is not a strategy, not a successful strategy. So state, the one that I did speak with Ashley a great deal about was story. And story is one of those things that can either be holding you back or really, really propels you forward. And so if your story about pageant interview, for example, and story is another way of saying belief systems. So if your belief about yourself or your story about yourself when it comes to pageant interview is that, oh, I've just never been a public speaker. I really hope that I don't get difficult questions because I freeze on difficult questions. I always get anxious. I always get nervous. I always stumble on my words. I always ramble. If that's your story, it doesn't matter what strategy I give you because you so clearly believe that you're basically rubbish at interview. And so the biggest breakthrough, remember, we're not talking incremental improvement here, we're talking about breakthroughs. The biggest breakthrough I could help you have as your coach would be to help you to rewrite that story. First off, find out what your story is, pull out the bits that are holding you back, and then rewrite the story so that it empowers you rather than holds you back. So this is what this is about. And that's the reason it says if they're only working on strategy, it's 10 to 20%. Is because I think that's a fair estimation of how important strategy is when it comes to competing in something like pageants. 10 to 20% is significant and it's not nothing. And you certainly should have strategy. I'm not saying you don't have strategy, but you need to cover state first. So you get onto that stage, you get into the interview room and you're in a great emotional state. And then you need to rewrite your story so that you believe when you're walking in, you have the right to take up space, take up room. You have the right to be heard and that you have every chance of being the title holder and that you deserve to be the title holder. Point blank, if you don't think you deserve to be the title holder, it's going to be very hard to convince anyone else of that. especially the judges. So, and one more thing with this, it says a coach obsessed with strategy while ignoring state and story. I don't know. I talked about this before in terms of coaches needing to stay up to date and furthering their own skill set. I don't see many coaches talking about how they're obsessed with strategy and how they're continually honing and refining their own skill set. And so I see the same strategies thrown about again and again. In an interview, it's the having your talking points, having your beginning every answer with as a, and then repeating the question back. That's one I hear very often, and I really dislike it because to me, I've heard it so many times. When I say repeating the question back, so you get asked, for example, an on-stage question about what's a topic that you think that we need to discuss more, or what's the biggest issue facing young people? And your answer begins with, well, I believe that the biggest issue facing young people is, or compound upon that, you combine it with the as a. So as your next Miss XYZ, I believe that the biggest issue facing young people is, and I know you've heard this before, and if you haven't, you will, because it's taught again and again and again. So this is why I say a coach obsessed with strategy is one thing, because then at least they're learning new strategies. But a coach who keeps recycling the same tired old cliche strategies, that's not even 10 to 20%. Don't take on that coach. Final red flag, number 7, they don't know when to refer out or let go. A good coach admits when they're not the right fit. A red flag coach holds on to clients they can't serve, or worse, holds them back. Now, this came up because I've had to recently get rid of clients and basically fire clients, refund money, and just say, look, I'm not the right coach. And not because they're bad, it's not because I'm bad, or that I'm great and that they're beneath me. Don't get it messed up. It's simply because I'm not the right person for them. I don't have the expertise, and frankly, I don't have the interest, because I'm very, and that sounds terrible, but hear me out. I'm very interested in working on mindset and working with people who really could get the most breakthrough from that. I have very little interest in teaching scripts. And so if you are a client whose only interest is in teach me a script, I don't have any interest in working with you. That's what I mean when I say I don't have the interest. Not personal. It's you want one thing and I want something else. And I'm not going to take your money to simply give you what you want, because that's not how I work as a coach. I have certain beliefs in terms of what I think is most important to learn as a pageant contestant and as a person, frankly. And if you want me to teach you something completely anathema to what I believe, I'm not going to take your money, because it just doesn't work for me. And so having a coach who knows who they want to work with to the point where they have the conviction enough to say, I'm not the coach for you, rather than just saying, yes, I'll take your money, I'll take your money, I'll take your money, I'll take your money. I mean, having money is an important thing, and it's a good thing to have money. But if your coach just takes on absolutely everyone without even asking them what their goals are, what pageant are you competing in, what areas are you struggling with, I believe personally, anyway, that's a red flag. So those are the 7 red flags that I discussed at varying lengths in my interview with Ashley Gonor. As I said, I will put the link below so you can go watch that whole interview on YouTube if you wish. I believe it'll be out on the normal podcasting platforms such as Apple and Spotify. And again, look, I hate to be feeling like I have to bring these things up again and again. The reason that I do it is it's incredibly frustrating to me when you guys are paying good money and getting suboptimal results that are less than what you deserve. And it's not simply because, well, that's pageants, different day, different judge. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about there are certain skills, tool sets that your coaches are not teaching you, not because they're withholding them, but because they don't know about them. And this is why I said I feel in many ways the pageant coaching industry is probably 20 or 30 years behind the times, because when it came to tennis coaching, I'll give you the tennis coaching analogy, back 20 or 30 years ago, you only took on, let's say, a sports psychologist. Well, if you took one on, there was this sort of stigma around it that, oh, you must be kind of a crazy person. And I think that stigma existed in psychology probably just point blank 20 or 30 years ago. That's why even to this day, now it's a bit better when people will say something such as, well, I have a therapist, and I think we're more accepting of that as a culture now. But 20, 30 years ago was a different story. And in many ways, I think pageant coaching hasn't accepted this idea that mindset is hugely important. And it seems to be stuck on recycling the same strategies again and again and again. And when I see pageant contestants answering onstage question with, as your next Miss whatever, I believe that the most important issue facing young people today is, or as your next Mrs. whatever, if I was to be made president tomorrow here, and it just sounds so formulaic. And then when it comes to your runway as well, I keep seeing people working on turns and turns and turns, learning the same routines. And then I get confused and frustrated, because not because I'm an expert at walk, but I know enough about coaching and I've seen enough to know about patterns. And just, even if I just say this to you, it doesn't make any sense if you want to stand out that you're learning the exact same routine that was taught to all the other people who are competing at the same pageant. And I know that happens because I've seen it happen, where coaches, walk coaches, they don't customize a routine for you. They give you a template and then off you go. And so I feel in many ways the pageant coaching industry needs to catch up with the times. And I think one of the ways it's going to do that is by updating its skill set, updating its skills specifically in mindset, psychology, performance psychology, and then also with such things as AI. And so I feel like I need to keep pushing this narrative and hopefully get some coaches to up-level their skills and modernize and become, let's say, more relevant so that it serves you guys better. But also I know there are other lesser known coaches who are very good at what they do and are aware of some of these skill sets and have some of this knowledge. And the only reason that they don't get more clients is because all of you guys are getting funneled into the whole sponsored and official coaches, and you enter this rat race, this vicious cycle where you go, oh, well, that coach coached so-and-so, so I'm going to go to them. And then you happen to do a bit better, not because of the coaching, but because, of course, you do it and you do anything enough, you get better. But then that coach claims you, and now you feel obligated to go back to them, and you keep going through the same merry-go-round. And if you, point blank, if you haven't tried different coaches, how would you know that your coach is a great one? Let me just say that. And so I want to give you guys more choice in terms of realizing that if you do want to win and you want to stand out, maybe you should be thinking outside of the box, outside of these sort of the official coaching conversation, and go, well, hang on. What have I genuinely actually been learning from this coach? And by the way, what does my coach know? How have they been improving? And how have they been updating their knowledge over the last 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? Because as I said in my interview with Ashley, the world, look, 20 years ago was 2006. Go back to the year 2000. If you're old enough to remember that, what was the world like? We had maybe the beginning of, I don't even think we had Facebook back then. We had the beginnings of the internet. I think Google might have been around. I think back then it was Yahoo or Alta Vista. And maybe it wasn't Facebook, maybe it was MySpace. I remember designing a website back in 1998, because that's when I was finishing up college. And I got so excited that I could put an animated GIF. And it was this video game Chocobo running. I thought, oh, that's so cool. I can put this GIF on a web page and someone around the other side of the world could see it. Guys, the world's done a few revolutions since then. You don't want to be with a coach who's teaching you information from back then. In much the same way, you wouldn't want a person who learned about web design back in the year 2000 to be designing your website now. You wouldn't want a doctor whose knowledge ended in the year 2000 to be operating on you now. So why would you be working with coaches who haven't significantly updated their knowledge, their skill set since I don't know when? Okay? So I'm not saying this as, oh, I'm the only one you should see comes in. No, that's not at all. I know there are other coaches out there who know their stuff, but they tend to be the lesser known ones because of the way that pageantry sometimes can be quite sycophantic. It's, oh, I'm now the new director of a system. Oh, you're a coach. Let's become friendly. Or I'm friendly with you because I've been around the industry and you and I know each other. You want to be a sponsored official coach because that makes me look good because now my system has a sponsored and official coach. And I'm going to push all my clients your way. I won't tell them that, but that's what I'm going to do. And then you can charge them and you make money. And then you give my people discounts. So, and that whole thing, it's just, I don't want to say ick. It gives me the ick. It's kind of, it is that though, right? And I don't like that. And I want that to change. So that's the reason I'm on this mission. I want to point out some of the things that I want you to be on the lookout for, and then find a coach, again, not necessarily me, but find a coach who, let's say, obviously is a good coach, knows their stuff and can coach, but maybe also is updated, is as hungry as you, and their knowledge isn't from 5,000 years ago. Okay? So, do with that information as you will. If you have any questions, any comments, any feedback on this, let me know. And it won't be the first time where I say something like this. I put out a video like this or a podcast like this, and other coaches come for me and have strong words. That's okay. That's my place. I've made my peace with it. I will say, prove me wrong. Okay, prove me wrong, especially with something like AI, prove me wrong. Okay, but have a great week. Send me your questions. Wish you luck with getting great coaches on your side because it is important. And I'll speak to you next time.